How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. And on this show, we talk about all things making music, the creative side, the technical side, whatever comes up. And today we have a very special guest. It is Zaak Kerstetter. What's up, Zaak?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's great to see you, man. We met at Ableton Loop, and here we are now talking about the world of making music and stuff. So it's nice to make that connection and then take it a little further here.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a great time at Loop. Met a bunch of cool people like yourself. It was just a really awesome way to just get to know other people in the community. So I'm stoked to go back next year, hopefully.
Oh yeah, I was there. It was my first time, and on Saturday, at some point, I was like, "Wow, I really have to come back next year," and I've been missing out, the last few years.
Yeah, I went last year and had a great time, and it was just as good, if not better, this year.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so Zaak, you are an Ableton Certified Trainer as well.
Yep.
You run the Boulder, Colorado Ableton User Group. You're working at KMG, which is Keep Music Going, right?
Yep, that's exactly it.
You've worked for Pyramid. I mean, you've been around doing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I've been teaching a lot, making a lot of music, teaching a lot, just kind of trying to help people, help grow the community, help train the next generation of people to make really cool music and try to change the world, all that.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And you make music yourself as Zenotope. It's like you described it, I saw, as like a future bass kind of sci-fi cinematic.
Weirdly enough, the term future bass means something different now than when I came up with that term. I think of it more as kind of like like you said, like more kind of like sci-fi cinematic bass music. But it kind of covers a little ambient music. Some of it's more dancey, some is more experimental, a little bit of everything. Just whatever I feel like doing, basically.
Yeah. Gotcha. It's funny how genres pop up out of nowhere so fast, and next thing you know, your description is
it's obsolete or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's always really hard to describe your own music. I found it's like,
oh, I know.
I know what it is in my heart, but explaining that to people can be tricky sometimes. But the three words that I use to describe it is cinematic, downtempo, bass.
Okay.
And it's vague enough that it can be whatever I want it to be, but it's general enough that people can kind of get a sense of what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah, I think we have this idea of our music in our head and all the things we love and all the things we want it to be. And sometimes what it actually is it takes another person to tell you and pinpoint it.
Absolutely. I've been actually making a lot of my students write biographies for homework. And it's really hard to write about yourself. It's really hard to have that voice and say with confidence, oh, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing.
Right.
So one of the hints I give them is hey, go make somebody else write your bio. Have them write about you and you help kind of edit it from there. Or vice versa, write it yourself and then have somebody else edit it, because it really does help to have that kind of outside perspective on what it is you're doing. Because it can be very hard to see when it's so close to your heart and what your life goals or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a really important thing to be able to do, especially if it's something like Loop or something where you're running into people and these really quick moments sometimes, to be able to communicate it quickly and effectively and let them get a sense of what it actually is.
Yeah, you got to have your elevator spiel ready to go.
Yeah, like the 60-second pitch or whatever.
Yep, exactly.
So, I found your background kind of interesting because you'd mentioned that you started with punk rock, which for me is really cool because that's kind of where I come from too, a bit nice. Playing guitar, playing in rock bands. So that a whole
some power chords. Yeah,
do it yourself, distortion kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's huge in my background. And sometimes I guess it feels like, I came from that world, as I guess you kind of did too. So coming into this other world where we find ourselves, which might be a little more electronic or just teaching music with a computer compared to with an instrument. It's nice to see someone else like yourself that has that kind of background too.
Well, I think that there is a lot of really interesting similarities between underground punk rock movements and a lot of electronic music movements where it came from people who were either marginalized or were kind of just off the beaten path and wanting to do their own thing, form these communities together. And in a lot of cases, especially early house music or electronic music, there were no rules. People were just kind of making up the rules as they went, which was kind of the whole ethos behind a lot of punk rock as well, where it's we're just going to throw everything out the window. start from scratch, see what happens, and accept people for experimenting creatively, for doing things differently, for thinking differently. And so I do see a lot of similarities there. And like weirdly enough, I hear a lot of similarities between like, just musically like dubstep, for example, and a lot of like heavy metal breakdowns where it's like the same rhythm, the same timing. There's a lot of that kind of like feeling to it. And I personally kind of came from punk rock into experimental music into electronic music, and that was kind of like what bridged the gap is people kind of making like noise music. Like going from like hardcore punk to noise music is like a very short jump, and that's kind of like what led me into it.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. I totally agree with you with like the hardcore and metal music breakdowns. And the first time I ever heard any sort of dubstep, when it went to like a halftime thing, I was like, "What? That's like the mosh pit part," like a hardcore
headbanging is coming back in a really big way.
Yeah,
like, that's a lot of my kids. That's what they're making. It's like, I want to make music that makes people headbang. I'm like,
right,
cool. That's people have been doing that for like 20, 30 years now.
Yeah, just totally new tools to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. So it was like a venture into just getting noisier and noisier for you, where that took you to this world.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, kind of what I mentioned earlier, like I really identify with a lot of like the underground culture of different music scenes.
Yeah.
And so at the time, this is like 2003, 2004, a lot of the punk rock bands were kind of like becoming more mainstream. And so I was trying to uncover and find new things that I'd never heard of before that were kind of like hidden away. And that's what led to, I had some friends who kind of showed me some mostly Japanese like punk bands. And there's a lot of connection in Japan between, different experimental music scenes. And I ended up actually moving to Japan, living there for a couple of years. And that's how I really kind of delved into a lot of the electronic music stuff.
Yeah, it's true, because I guess something stays underground for a little while, and then as it gets more and more popular, it for better or for worse, sort of has to leave the basements and the garages and the little secret warehouses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with being popular or making money off music or being mainstream, whatever. I think it's definitely a choice you can make, and I try not to judge people for that. But definitely, I'm always looking for something new and exciting. Whatever the cutting edge thing is, what's the next thing that nobody's ever heard of before? And I always think those movements are particularly interesting.
Yeah. And I see those parallels too, I think, in students. I work with high school students as well. And I find that some of those, like, what would have been the punk rock show for me might be this like kind of like underground electronic thing going on.
Absolutely. I see very much the same thing. A lot of kids who are like, cool, I'm feeling creative. I want to, do something. I don't want to play football or whatever. I just want to like discover my own voice as a human being. Music's always been that kind of outlet for especially teenagers and young people. And the method of creation has changed in a lot of ways, but a lot of the attitude behind it is still very similar.
Yeah, a lot of identity gets wrapped up in that, even like what they dress like and all the kinds of things they relate to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and schools really don't have those avenues built into them too much. For me, growing up playing guitar, being in bands, I was really into music, but I was not playing the trumpet in the band or the orchestra or marching or anything. And I didn't want to. It wasn't interesting to me. But
I was the same way.
It's so funny, like how like close I could have been to going into that looking back, but there was just nothing there to grab me.
I think in a lot of ways our education system doesn't really encourage people to kind of like branch out and find their own ways. A lot of curriculums have been set in stone for the last 40, 50 years. Like music, for example, it's like you learn your scales, you learn this, you learn that. You learn the trumpet, you learn the oboe, whatever the instrument is you pick in choir or in orchestra or choir or marching band. And it's been cool to see that like very slow and subtle shift towards music technology entering some of those programs. And that was actually one of the cool things about being at Loop and talking to people who are working with high schoolers or working with people who are especially in like middle school, high school age, and being like, we got 20 pushes in our building. And now our students can make whatever they want to make, and kids will love it. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing with some of my students. It got a
awesome.
little,
I remember you mentioning that. That's awesome.
Yeah, a little after school program going, and here's your push, go to town. And
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun, and to see them in such a different light too, because it's very easy as an English teacher, right? To, I see the same people all the time, every day for 42 minutes, 5 days a week for, 10 months in the year. It's very easy to think that they are just the person I see in that one situation. Those 42 minutes in this class that they don't care about, they might not be connecting with. But then when they come to music production, and it's like, oh, wow, like there's a whole nother person there. There's a whole like excitement and interest.
Yeah.
It's a great lesson for me just to realize that we are not who we are in one situation. That's not absolutely the complete picture. There's so much more.
Yeah, especially if you're in high school. Like,
yeah.
You can have one kid in one class and the same person, but be a totally different personality in a different class, or when they get home, or, I think that a lot of times like our passions really kind of change who we are. So if you get somebody who's excited about something, then all of a sudden they open up and they light up, and you can actually like, it's cool to see that transformation sometimes with students.
Yeah, it is. It's very exciting.
Yeah, because I mostly work, I work with people all ages, but mostly like 17 to 25. Most of my students are kind of in that range. Although we have students going up to 65, 70 years old, which is pretty cool. But yeah, a lot of those kids are like either straight out of high school or straight out of college, or in that period of their lives where they're trying to figure out what they want to be doing. And a lot of them have made like a really firm commitment to like, music's the thing that I want to be doing. And I think for me personally, a big part of my job is just trying to like encourage them and keep them on that path, and let them be excited about the thing that they're excited about.
Well, that's good, because it's a tough decision to make and stick with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
it's a terrifying
decision. You're going to get beat up.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to face rejection. You're going to face hardships and obscurity and all this. Really,
it's not an easy choice to make by any means. And so I'm always really impressed with all my students who've been like, yeah, this is it. This is what I want to do. And I remember like, for me personally, but like wanting to make that decision and being on the fence about it for a really long time, and not sure like whether this was a realistic life choice, or I was just, fooling myself or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I can really appreciate that, because in all honesty, I didn't make that decision. I went a more, safe route and became a high school teacher. And, which is supposedly more secure. And, music, but at the same time, it really taught me that like if I want to do anything with music, then I really have to work, because I don't have that kind of time, that kind of dedication to it, I guess, because I wasn't built into what I do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it really taught me a lot about like the effort that goes into it and the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to balance, life if you're trying to make music all the time sometimes.
Oh yeah, yeah, like going out, being social.
Yeah, got to make some sacrifices in some points.
Yeah, I guess that's why so many of my friends also play music, because then we can kind of do both, socialize and play as well.
Yeah, two birds with one stone. She's like, cool.
Right.
I got to hang out with people and I got to make music. I'm happy.
Yeah. And it is a totally different kind of connection when you're vibing with someone musically, and you're on the same page, and you're building off of each other's ideas. That kind of energy is really magic.
Yeah.
It never gets old, and it almost always makes me kind of laugh while it's happening and get like a little giddy just out of the joy of like, we're doing this thing. Like, we can't talk about it really.
Yeah.
But it's happening, and it's
do you ever do like push jams with your classes? Or
we're kind of not there yet, actually.
Okay.
We've got the pushes 2 years ago, and it's been a little bit of a struggle, like kind of getting through the tape, the red tape of getting it approved, and then having it actually be a real club, and then dealing with computers that are the same age as my students.
Yep.
all the challenges that I'm sure everyone goes through.
Yeah, the bureaucracy of working in a school.
We're at a good point now. We had this issue where we were having trouble getting like the software authorized for whatever reason. It just wasn't sticking. We'd get it authorized, and then next time you go on, it's not. But luckily, the students I have been so motivated to do it. Like even though they can't save their work, they're still coming back.
That's cool.
So it's something I definitely want to get into soon. And question I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about is sort of like, I saw you teach like the beginner's course and like kind of where to start, because I get students that are from all types of backgrounds musically, even as teenagers. Some of them have been playing in band. They understand music theory probably better than I do. And other ones know nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. And they've never opened the software. They know they want to do it. They're interested. And so I get a wide range of abilities coming in.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out a good way to approach that.
Yeah, I have dealt with the same thing a lot, especially with the user group meetings. The user group meetings so I've been doing the Boulder user groups for the last 3 years or so. I do meetings every month, and either I will pick a topic and come in and present on it, or I'll bring in a guest lecturer to come in and present something. And the issue with that is we get different people every month. So we have a core people who show up pretty much every month, but there's always new people coming in and out. And some people have been using Live for 8 years. Some people have never opened it before in their lives.
Right.
And so I've got to teach a topic where both ends of the spectrums can actually get something. And I deal with that as well as my classes at KMG. So that's a 6-month program that I teach. And we have people who come in who are brand new, never made a song in their lives, and people, again, who have been making music for several years. And so what I've found is I kind of tried to break up topics into like different little building blocks, basically. So I'll take a topic, and for the first part of my presentation or lecture or class or whatever I'm doing, I will start with the basics. Like, here's the basic ground level you need to understand the topic, and then kind of evolve into, all right, now that we know the basics of it, here's a more, here's how we can integrate that, or here's how we can actually utilize that in making a track. And that way, people at the beginning who are of their music careers can know what I'm talking about, and hopefully follow me into the second part. And then people who have been using it for a long time get a refresher on the basics, and then get to see how they can actually apply that to something they're working on. So that's usually how I try to build a lot of my lectures, especially ones for people for like one-off presentations for user group or something like that, where I don't know who's in the audience then, and I don't know if I'll ever see them again. But yeah, that's something I've been trying to do quite a bit. Just kind of like start basic, build up the building blocks until I have a foundation, and then develop into a more complex idea from there.
Yeah, I get the same thing where there's new people coming. We meet pretty much every week, and it's one of the killers is it's a short time. It's 40 minutes. So to do a presentation, I try to keep it real quick. Yeah, real quick, like stuff that people can then go on and play with. But having like new people every time too, I want them to be a part of the club. I want them to be interested. So I don't want to leave them out either and make them feel welcome.
Yeah.
So it is a little tricky to find that balance.
Another thing that I found is really helpful is if you have like lab time, or you have like a assignment or something they're working on during the actual class time, is try to pair up people who are more advanced with people who are less advanced. And that way, hopefully they can teach each other some stuff. And that way that kind of makes it feel like everybody's actually doing something, and certain people aren't getting left behind, or certain people aren't bored.
Right. Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that. Yeah, I've been thinking about putting together like some projects too, with sort of like half built maybe.
Yeah.
That might be fun. Just, I think of an important thing for them is to be having fun quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Making music, it's like you're doing something almost immediately.
Yeah, especially with younger people, like the high school age, middle school age, as much time as possible actually touching the buttons and turning knobs and doing the things. And that's how most people learn. People learn by doing. People don't necessarily always learn by hearing or seeing quite as much. So having that time to actually it's one thing to see me demonstrate something. It's a totally different thing to actually do it yourself.
Yeah.
And so I always try to make sure my students have time during class, or during the time we're together, to actually get their hands on it. And I try to take a step back for a second, let them try to figure out themselves. And if they have any issues, then I'll swoop in and help them out. But for the most part, like really make them try to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah, hands-on is so important. I'm always surprised at how almost like timid they are about touching the buttons and turning the knobs.
Yeah.
I always have to emphasize you're not going to break anything, and if you mess up,
they're pretty sturdy. Yeah, they're designed to like be played.
Yeah, and even just like within the program itself, within the session, it's like, hey, if you go that far off track, you make a new one, you're starting from scratch again. So there's like, no worries in ruining music for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Make mistakes. One of the probably most important piece of advice that I give my students, like day one usually, is make lots of terrible music. It's the best thing you can do. I would much rather a student make 30 awful songs than one really good one. Because you really learn by doing it a lot. You learn by like making those mistakes, learning from those, and like retrying. And I think a lot of people get really tied up in perfection. Be like, all right, I'm not going to let anybody see my song until it's fully done. It's perfect. It's where it is. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the artists who are out there who are releasing lots of tracks are probably only releasing about 10 to 15% of what they make. And so if you want to make a 10-song album, be prepared to write 100 songs. And so if you're writing one song a month, it's going to take you a really long time to do that. But if you're writing 30 songs a month, you can actually generate enough content, pick your 10 favorite ones, and then start actually developing those.
Right.
And like get comfortable making mistakes, get comfortable like not being perfect, because and like nobody's going to judge you for it. Nobody cares if your track's not mixed exactly the way it's supposed to be. Just make more stuff, and that's how you can really like get better, and that's how you can be successful.
I totally agree with that, and I think when you just do a lot, make a lot of songs, it takes you through the entire process of writing a song. It takes you from the beginning, which you always get practice at the beginning. Every time you open a new session, you're practicing starting. But if you're just going a little bit and you're never getting to the end, or if you're just harping over every little detail, it becomes too precious after a while.
Yep.
And you're looking for that perfection, which you cannot ever find. You'll always find a reason to turn another knob.
Yep. I struggle with that a lot. I always want my tracks to sound perfect all the time, and that was like one of the biggest lessons for me over the years. It's like, okay, it's not exactly what I want it to be, but it's good. I like it, and that's a really important thing, is like coming to terms with that and not like putting yourself down over not having everything be perfect all the time.
Right. The first time I ever finished an album was, I guess, 2003 or 4. And I'd just kind of gotten like some decent recording equipment, moved up from the cassette 4-track tapes to a couple ADAT machines with the VCR tapes, And I remember just saying, and I was starting to get like a little obsessed, like, I got to make sure I'm compressing this right and using the proper microphone and all of that kind of stuff. And I remember just saying, like, you know what? The equipment I have now is so high tech, and so good that even if I do a bad job recording and whatever and mixing, it's still going to sound a lot better than what I had. It still sound pretty good. So I let go of that quest for everything being perfect and nice, and just said, I just want to finish songs. And it was amazing what that like little twist in my mindset did. And I always have to keep reminding myself of that too. It's not like I learned this lesson once and now I'm good, and I can just do it. But it was a really specific moment where I just said, I'm not going to make myself crazy about this stuff, and I'm just going to get the songs down. They'll sound pretty good no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's even more true now with the technology we have. It's almost, I don't want to say it's hard to sound bad, but you have a lot more than we used to.
And one of the things I've actually been realizing, especially over the last couple of years, is a lot of times those imperfections are really what makes music really good. Not having everything be quantized all the time. Sometimes having like a slightly dirty recording can really make it feel more organic and really can make it feel more human. And because if everything is perfect all the time, it feels really, really sterile. It feels like overly curated. And what I want is, I want emotion, I want feeling, I want some personality in the tracks that I listen to. So I've actually been spending more time trying to do things less perfect and really just kind of like getting those weird clicks and pops that might be in the background recording or whatever it is. I'll actually spend a lot of time like unquantizing stuff, like actually taking my performance and like purposely moving stuff off time to give it that more human feel. And it makes a huge difference. I've been really enjoying my music a lot more since I started really trying to go for the less perfect kind of sound.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. I spend a lot of time fighting the perfection of the digital recording these days. And a lot of the things that I hated about being limited with my 4-track tape recorder as a kid are the very things I kind of wish I had now, where
absolutely.
The kind of dirtiness, the saturation, or just, it was just such a, when I first got Pro Tools, I got a Mac, I sold my beautiful 24-track Tascam mixer, which to get a computer, because who needs that anymore, right? But I still kind of regret that. But I got Pro Tools, and I was doing drums by I thought I was being really clever. I sampled each hit of the drum 10 times from quiet to super loud. And I was taking those, and I didn't know about samplers and drum machines really, so I was just dropping them right on the grid. Just going through the timeline, writing my song.
One at a time.
One at a time, And I was really surprised that having everything perfectly on the grid sounded kind of weird. And it was almost like I couldn't play my guitar to it right because it was just too mechanical. And it was just like, hey, this is what I've like wished for forever. And now that I have it, it's like too far in that direction. So then it became like kind of just randomly moving things a little bit. One thing that helped a lot is I would play the cymbals and the hi-hats myself because they would never be perfect. That makes a big difference. So and even like tuning of like vocals and guitars or synthesizers really in the computer, you hit an A on like operator, for instance, it's A440 and it doesn't even budge. But playing a guitar, even the one note varies just based on the way the string moves. And those imperfections, like you said, I think really are where a lot of the emotion come, a lot of the feel. And we have to be careful not to squeeze that all out because we can.
Or even in a more like technical sense, having unsynced LFOs is something that makes a huge difference to me. Because when all your flows are synced exactly on time, again, it feels really curated. But if you can get an LFO to sound close enough, but not quite there, it actually sounds really nice. I actually had a student ask me a couple weeks ago, is there a mathematical way to figure out, if you know the tempo of your song, what the frequency of your LFO should be to be quarter notes or eighth notes or something like that? So we actually sat down with the spreadsheet and like built out the calculations for this so we could like get our LFOs close to where we wanted them to be, but not exactly. And there's artists like Flume, for example. A lot of my students are really into Flume, and they ask me like, how does he get this sound? It's because nothing is synced and nothing is quantized. That's like literally how he gets his sound. And so it's cool to be able to kind of like show them like, all right, we can like not make this perfect, and it's going to sound great. Don't worry about it.
It is weird, right? And just that it does something. Just it loosens it up. I don't know how to really put it, but it just kind of makes it feel less uptight. It's almost like loosening your tie or something, and just feels a little more cozy, a little more comfortable. I've been experimenting with arpeggiators, just unsynced, and just like little flurries of notes. Don't always hold it down the whole time, but just kind of let these little off-time notes just kind of, twinkle in and out. And it's nice how it just kind of gives a little bit of a push and a pull to the song.
Definitely, you get these old school arcade kind of sounds.
Yeah.
You like a really fast arpeggiator?
Yeah, and sometimes even turning the time knob as it's going and letting it just weave in and out. I'm very into that. I really like the LFOs. I find really useful sometimes for just like really slow pitch modulation on certain things. I use the frequency shifter a lot inside of Live, and I'll put that on the whole track sometimes and just let it move a little bit.
I've been very slowly getting more into the frequency shifter. For a long time, I never touched it, didn't want anything to do with it. Because I was like, oh, I want my songs to like sound in tune and sound in key and sound good. And then what I've been doing recently is been putting it on like percussive sounds. So like little one-shot cymbals or snares or hats or something like that. And like just playing with the pitch, and you get some really cool, interesting sounds. And you don't really need to worry about it being in key or anything like that. It's just some cool, background percussion stuff that works really well.
That's a cool idea, because the pitch of percussion changes a lot in real life depending on how hard you're hitting and where you're hitting. And
and you can get these more kind of like abstract percussive sounds, like almost like experimental noises, as opposed to like, here's just a little bongo. It's like, here's like a really weird, tripped out version of a bongo.
That's cool. Yeah, and this kind of goes back to what we were saying about producing a lot of tracks and producing a lot of music, because when you do just a couple tracks, you really work on them and you're careful, right? But when you're doing stuff all the time, you don't mind just screwing around and like sort of like taking one for the team with this track. Like, I'm just gonna try something really freaking weird with this track.
Yeah, the happy accident machine. So I've built a couple of patches that are just like a bunch of synths and effects with a bunch of random LFOs on them, and so I just hit it until it makes something cool, and I'm recording to audio the whole time, and I'm like, cool, that one sound is now the core idea for my song, and I built a whole song around it. And
that's
it's
cool.
Kind of like, using randomization to kind of like get these happy accidents. You're like, all right, the song was about this one idea at first, but then I made this weird sound, and now the song is about this new idea. And you can, use that as a theme for your entire track.
Right, I like that. So you've got like racks just kind of designed for chaos.
Yeah, pretty much. And I might sit there just like sending a MIDI note every quarter note and just re-recording to audio until I get like 5 or 6 that I like. And then, I might resample those or build something out of those. But yeah, randomly generated stuff is definitely something I've been getting more and more into as, as my productions progress, and just getting these like cool, weird sounds that I never would have been able to make them if I tried to, right? If I was like sitting there intentionally being like, okay, I'm going to turn my oscillator this way and turn my filter this way, never in a million years would have it happened. But just let the machine do the work, randomize it, record it, and then cool, here's my idea.
Yeah, and that's, I think, key is like, let it record, just go.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes you pick like that little section, and then I guess it's like kind of like the rule of jazz. Like if you do something, do it twice.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it like sounds like it was on purpose. But yeah, like once you take that craziness and then repeat it, then now it sounds like something. It's intentional, and that can be a really cool way to work. I get a lot of inspiration that way too, because it's like, oh, like I didn't know that was going to happen, and now, let me go with this now.
Yeah, and I was showing this to some kids the other day, and I was like, the cool thing about this, using randomizers and randomization, is you don't need to think a lot. You don't need to sit there and like calculate what your plan is. You just can kind of just like chill out and be like, all right, I'm just gonna make some weird noises and see what happens. And when something cool happens, then you got your idea, and then you can run with it. Which for me is great, because I normally don't feel really creative in the morning. Like before noon, I'm just like, my brain's not fully there. So if I don't want to have to like sit there and actually do work, I can just set up a bunch of random stuff, hit record till I get something cool. Once I make something cool, I'm gonna wait till afternoon after I eat my lunch and know what's going on, and then actually start working on my track.
Yeah, and that takes you away. Sometimes you can overthink music, but now you're feeling it, and you just,
exactly.
Oh yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I feel that. Because it can get so technical, and that's like the weird like dichotomy, I guess, is that it is on one hand so emotional, but on the other hand, it can get so technical and like mathematical, even computery.
Yeah, especially a lot of electronic music in the last like 6 or 7 or 8 years. It's gotten very, very technical, and just the level of technical skill on average of the average producer has gone up so immensely. I think partially just because of things like YouTube and Ableton and just the resources that are out there where people are sharing knowledge and sharing information. And so everything does get very, very technical. And I think that sometimes there's a slight bit of overemphasis on the technicality and less of an emphasis on like the emotionality or other aspects of making music. I think especially when it comes to things like mixing. I think I have a lot of students who come in first day class and I'm like, all right, how do you mix and how do you master? I'm like, dude, you got to make a track first before you ever mix and master it. Like learn like from, one step at a time. Because people think that, if I take a track and I mix it perfectly and I master it perfectly, I'm going to get signed to a label or I'm going to get booked at festivals or whatever. But really, if you have a good track and then you mix it and master it, really well, then you've got a track. But you have to make the track first. And people like to jump ahead to that really technical side for some reason.
Right. And it doesn't matter. You can have a shit song that you mastered perfectly and mixed perfectly.
Yeah. It's still a bad song.
Yeah. Way worse than a great song, poorly mixed, poorly mastered.
Yeah. I'm kind of ready for electronic music to go through its grunge phase. Where it's like, just, have whoever the new next Kurt Cobain's going to be, come in and be like, it's not about, all the production value and all these things. It's just about like pure raw emotionality and like that kind of thing. So I'm waiting for that to happen. Who knows when that'll be, but eventually that's got to happen.
I was thinking along those lines about a week ago. I was working on a track and I just decided I wanted it to sound destroyed. And it was really kind of inspired by some of the new stuff that Nine Inch Nails is doing, which I think what I really like about the new stuff that they're putting out is it's pretty dirty. And there's like some stuff that happens where there's one track off of, he just put out a series of 3 EPs. And one of the tracks, I got to look it up, put in the show notes maybe, but on one of the tracks, it's like he ran the whole song through distortion and just kept turning it up for like 7 or 8 minutes. And it's just so awesome. Because
I actually have a track I wrote pretty recently that I basically just did that. It starts off really pretty, and I just have everything routed through a send that has a bunch of distortion on it, and I slowly turn up the distortion, and it's awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like just so surprising, and then it just kept going, and like the longer it went, I was just like, hell yeah, man! Like,
yeah, nice. That's
thank
awesome.
you for just like doing something, to screw with me and just destroy your track a little.
Yeah.
I had this idea where as I was mixing and singing, I was singing it live and I was doing like effects on the whole track. And as I got a little more like into the singing, I was just turning up these distortions, mostly with a combination of like the saturator and the dynamic tube. Because if you set the dynamic tube to, I think, like B or C, there's like 3 different models, A, B, C, it really starts crumpling the song where it loses a lot of the audio information. It's like it sounds kind of like on an old tape, I guess, where if you just cranked it too much, like it would get distorted, but then it would just disappear. and that's kind of like what starts to happen. And I was just having so much fun with that, and it was just such a gratifying like experience, because I almost went into it like, I'm going to try to mix this like and make it sound really good. But then I was like, nah. I want to have fun tonight.
See how far you can take it.
Yeah. And it was kind of inspired by that Trent Reznor Nine Inch Nails song. It was just so nice to hear. And I think, like you said, that it is like, I think it's on the horizon, where, because like things have gotten so extreme. A lot like clean. We went through like kind of the loudness thing for a long time, and I could just see like it's time for like where things don't need to be so pretty anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it can still be pretty, but I think that like the overemphasis on the technical side of production. I'm just curious to see what that would sound like if electronic music were to turn in that direction. And if you think about like the start of grunge music as being a response to like 80s hair metal, to me, there's a lot of similarity between 80s hair metal and like the modern EDM world, where it's like these giant stadium shows with the big pyrotechnics and the lights, and it's like the costumes and the whole thing. So to me, it would make a lot of sense for somebody to like do the whole Kurt Cobain, Seattle grunge thing.
Yeah.
But with electronic music.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would sound like, but I'm curious to see what that would be.
We'll have to work on that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I really do appreciate like dirty recordings and like all the things you said about like feeling organic and feeling alive and feeling emotional often come from like maybe it wasn't the greatest recording or the best performance. Well, I don't want to say best performance or technically the best performance, but man, the way your voice broke there,
Yep.
the way that went wrong was so cool, so real.
Yeah. Yeah. A good friend of mine, Max Savage, shout out to Max if he ever takes a listen to this. Probably my favorite person when it comes to talking about music. He was producing an artist and she sent him a vocal. He built a whole track for it. And then he brought her into the studio to re-record the vocal. And for whatever reason, they could not get the vocal right. It just wasn't working. And what he did is he went back to the original vocal, which she recorded, I think, on her iPhone or something like that. She just was singing to her phone. And that was the idea he was sent. And he went back and he took the original recording and just used that. And what he found was the original recording was a little bit out of key, but it was just the right amount of out of key for it to work perfectly. And so I think that to me was a really interesting story about how you can have all the right gear, you can have all the auto tune in the world, you can have all the setup, whatever you need to do. But nothing really beats that little bit of imperfection that came from the iPhone recording. And I think that's a really good way to start approaching music, is think less about, it's not all the fancy gear. Because I think a lot of people get really obsessed, if I get the new microphone and the new interface and then all the new stuff, the new synthesizer, I'm going to be famous. And a lot of my favorite albums have been produced on no gear whatsoever. And I think that it's much less about what you have and more about how you use it and how you choose to insert yourself into your music.
Well, I think probably something that happened with that iPhone recording was that's when she was feeling it. That's
exactly.
when it came out. And that's tangible. You can tell. And I know of myself, sometimes when I go to recreate a song or recreate a feeling, it's just not the same anymore. I've moved on, or I'm not there. I don't know what it is, but sometimes that original demo is just, that's the one.
There's some magic sprinkled in there sometimes.
Yeah.
And you gotta know it when you have it, and just let that speak for itself.
I think that's a really hard thing to know, though, and it's where another person is really handy, because it's very easy to get self-conscious about what you're doing and critical, and I've had that over and over again, where maybe when I was doing something, I was really into it, feeling it, and I listened to it the next day. I was a little off time, or I was a little out of tune. But then a couple months later, I listened back. I was like, oh, that's really pretty nice. It's not perfect, but there's something there that, that again, that balance of technical and emotional is really hard to get right. And sometimes you can squeeze all the goodness out of it one way or another, really.
Yeah, I had a weird experience a couple months ago. I found a really old hard drive from 2006, 2007, when I was very first getting into electronic music, and I had some of my very, very first tracks I ever made on it. And I listened to some of them, and some of them were, you could tell that they were my very first tracks. But there was one where I was like, wow, this was a really great idea. I didn't know it was a great idea at the time. It was just me screwing around. But it's funny, you can time definitely changes how you can feel about some of these things, for sure.
Yeah. Do you think you'll ever do anything with that?
Probably not. It was definitely a fun maybe someday I'll eventually release it as something that's brand new, but it's actually a decade old or what.
A few years down the road when we're all craving your unreleased recordings.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, probably won't. But it is interesting to see how time does change your perspective on these things. And sometimes the tracks that you love that you've made, don't really hold up later on. And sometimes the tracks that you didn't have quite the same feeling for kind of grow over time. I mean, same thing is true for music you listen to as well.
Yeah,
but it's especially interesting for your own personal creations and which ones stick with you and which ones kind of that was cool, but I moved on.
Yeah. I find myself probably a little more forgiving over the technical side over time, where at the time maybe I would get upset with the track because it wasn't perfect in this way or that way. But sometimes the things that I thought I did really well come out feeling kind of dry and sterile after a little bit of time.
Yeah, I usually, when I'm working on something, will put it away for a week or two and not listen to it, not touch it, and then come back to it and just all right, how am I actually feeling about this? Just to kind of reset everything.
Yeah. I think it's important too to think about the purpose of the track, because if you're listening to it, say it's something where you're supposed to be kind of looking out the window on a rainy day, and you're going out to hang out with your friends and party for the night, you're never going to feel it the same way. I guess, like, let's come back to it when you're in that kind of zone that the song is sort of intended for. Because that staring out the window on a rainy day track is never going to feel great when you're trying to have a good time with your buddies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to balance those two emotions together at the same time.
Right. So
I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's definitely be a tricky song to write.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to have you share a little thing that stuck out that I heard you say when we were talking at Loop. You were telling about the idea of the rule of threes, which I think is just such a cool technique about making music. I thought, why not get it from the source here?
Yeah, so I'm actually not the source of the rule of threes. This is actually something that one of my instructors and former bosses at Pyramid, Matt Donner, taught myself as well as the entire production class when I was a student there. And the idea is that when you're building an arrangement, each section of your song has a particular idea or goal or feeling or emotion, right? So your verse has this emotion, and then your chorus has this emotion. Or the way I usually think about it is parts of a story. Almost all the songs that I write have some kind of narrative to them. So the first section, it would be one part of the story. The next section would be another part of the story. So each section should be identifiable as separate than the other sections. And one of the best ways to do this is to have at least 3 elements of your song change going from one section to another. So, for example, you could have two new sounds come in and one sound go out, and the combination of those 3 sounds all changing at the same time gives a new emotional value to the new section of your song. It's not a hard, fast rule. It's very much a kind of like feel it out kind of thing. But the idea is if 3 things change, our brains kind of subconsciously notice it as like, oh, this is a new area or this is a new idea at this point. Because if only one thing changes, it's mostly still the same section, same thing with 2. Right around 3 is when you really start to notice like, okay, we're in a new part of the song. And that's the idea behind that. And I've been using that for years. I've been teaching that for years, and it works really well. And it definitely helps make arrangements feel like each section of the song is unique and each section of the song is different, even if not that many things change.
Right. So this could be like you said, new sounds, maybe a new rhythm comes in, or new
like
chord progression.
Yeah, maybe the kick comes in, the bass line comes in, and then the pads drop out all at the same time. And that makes it feel like, okay, now we're in a different area.
Right.
And it's like I said, it's not a hard, fast rule. Sometimes I ignore it, but for the most part, it's something that's kind of subconsciously stuck with me since taking that class, and helped me kind of like figure out like, all right, how do I get, because transitions can be really tricky.
Yeah.
Like getting from one idea to the next can oftentimes feel really daunting for people. And that tends to be like a nice subtle way to kind of like progress from one idea to the next.
Yeah, I find that a challenging thing to do, especially when I'm working in live, for instance. If I'm in the session view and I'm kind of grooving on one part for a long time, writing it, putting it together, and it's like, I really need another part. And it's like, I'm stuck in this one area now because I've maybe been listening to it for an hour or so.
Yeah.
And to get to something else, just to have like concrete ideas like that, I think are really important. Almost like I've really got to make myself like a list somewhere that I just have on the wall of things like that. Like try the rule of threes. Change 3 things and then see where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that especially for people who are first getting started building arrangements, it's a very daunting task, right? Because with arrangement, there are rules, but they're not really rules, right? There's a lot of ideas and concepts about how you could or should arrange a song, but you can literally do anything you want. It's the Wild West when it comes to like building a track. And so I think that can be really intimidating. And so what all people end up doing is be like, cool, here's my drum loop. I'm just going to loop that for 64 bars. And then here's my bass. I'm going to loop that for 64 bars. And you get these songs that are just, one long loop.
Right.
And so, dividing those sections up into 3, 4, 5, 6 different sections can make the song feel a lot more interesting and engaging. I think these days people have really short attention spans. for whatever reason, social media, whatever. So your song needs to grow and evolve over time. And so if it's the same thing for too long, people tune out and stop caring. So being intentional about developing your song from one idea to the next can be a kind of tricky thing to do. And then trying to also make all these different sections mesh together also can be kind of tricky. So putting in things like noise sweeps or builds or drops or whatever are all different ways to kind of approach like dividing up your song into these different ideas.
I found, and maybe you've saw something similar, being that you come from kind of the guitar background, rock band type of thing. When I started like studying like some electronic music genres and how people were doing arrangements, I was always really surprised where it's like, okay, your intro's 8 bars, then you build, and then everything was like so by the bar, 16 bars of this, 16 bars of this, then we'll do 8 bars of this. And I was just like, what? Because like in like rock music, like no one really talks like that.
Yeah.
Although there is definitely a verse, chorus, guitar solo it used to be, then, chorus and whatever. So I guess it's predictable in that way. But I was always shocked at that sort of way of looking at it, where it was in these like little chunks. Where's your drop? Where's your build up? Like every song needs a build up. It's kind of surprising.
Yeah. Well, for me personally, coming from the more kind of experimental realm into the more electronic music realm, or kind of bridging those two things, I didn't notice that for a really long time, because the songs I listened to could be like, an 8-minute ambient track, which there are no, it's one long, track or one long section that just evolves over time. And I think that a lot of times those really archetypical or kind of preset arrangements tend to be a lot with dance music. And I think the reason for that is if your goal for your track, before you talk about the intention of your track, whether it's a rainy day track or it's a go out and party with your track. If you're making a go out and party track, there's a kind of formula that works really well for kind of shifting the energy on a dance floor. That tends to be like you have your intro and you got to build and you got to drop and you got to break and then a build and then a drop. And that to me is really where I see this kind of like preset formulaic arrangement. I think there are a lot of artists out there and a lot of genres that really play with that arrangement. But I think that's the kind of the style that has really emerged and especially kind of moved more into the mainstream for electronic music. And so that's what a lot of people associate with all electronic music.
Right.
Where it's like, cool, it's got to have that drop, or what am I doing on the dance floor? Like I don't know what to do with my hands. Like people get really confused if you play around with that too much. That being said, like there are plenty of artists out there who are doing more kind of experimental arrangements, and I always think that's really fascinating to me. People who can kind of play with that, but also still do the like dance music thing.
That's a good point, because you need a certain level of expectation if you want people to dance to your music.
Yeah, it needs to be somewhat predictable, and
you can't get too crazy.
Yeah, this is something I say to all my students, is that a lot of people think they know how to dance, but actually have no idea how to actually dance. So if you give them like a weird time signature, or if you try to go too far out there with it, you can just lose people on the dance floor, and then they wander off and go do something else. So I think that there's a certain level of predictability that does help, but at some points you can play with that predictability. You can kind of like fake people out or do different things with it. But if you go too far in that experimental realm with dance music, you definitely lose the attention of people who are not necessarily know what's going on when it comes to dancing.
Yeah, I think I read in David Byrne's book of the Talking Heads. I think How Music Works, it might be called. He spoke a lot about the idea of this balance between the expected and the unexpected. We need something familiar, but not too familiar. If it's too familiar, we get bored. If it's too unfamiliar, we don't even understand what it is, and we get disinterested from that too. I guess that's a little bit of what we're talking about here. I think a lot of dance music tends to border more on the ultra familiar side of things than the other way around, and that's why often people get these kind of like cookie cutter arrangements in a lot of dance music that way. I guess it makes sense too, because if you're going to dance, you might not. The music the artistry and the experimental nature of the music is definitely secondary to you. You want to go, you want to feel the beat, and you want to move and have a good time. You're not and again, like as the producers, it's probably easy for us to be like, nah, we need to do it. Let's put the 7/8 part in here.
Yeah.
Let's like really make people think, and that's counterproductive.
But those are actually the songs I really love to DJ. It's like I love to like find those, you know, different time signatures or like tempo changes or whatever to DJ, which makes my life as a DJ really difficult. But it's part of, you know, part of how I enjoy DJing is being able to play those tracks that normally don't get played out on dance floors.
Find a way to make them work.
Yeah, try to make it work. And, you know, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But for me, that's part of the fun of DJing is kind of taking those risks and seeing how people like it.
Nice. So let me ask you a little bit about your live performances. I saw some fun pictures on your site. You playing in all kinds of weird contraptions, like weird stages and things. Even one where you were in like a Game Boy outfit, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that was a Halloween party.
Nice. Yeah. So what's your live performance setup like? What are you doing?
So I actually have several different live performance setups. I have 3 going on 4 right now that I'm playing around with. So the one I've been doing a lot recently is just my DJ set. So I DJ with live, and I use my iPad as my DJ controller using an app called Lemur. And that's just a pretty standard, you know, if I'm going to go play a club kind of DJ set.
It says Lemur, you said?
Yep. Yeah, Lemur's an app.
Yeah, okay.
And it starts as a black screen, and you can kind of drag and drop your interface into it. So if I want a bunch of buttons, I can drag a bunch of buttons in there. And so I like that mostly because the iPad is really compact and it's really easy to travel with, and it's pretty hard to break. So I'll use that as my controller, and then all my songs are inside of Live. And then my other setup that I use primarily is my all original custom live performance setup. And this is where I take my own tracks, the stems, and I will, depending on where I'm in what song, play different parts of the stems. So I might start playing drums and then switch to playing bass line and then switch to playing a melody and then back to drums. It's different for every song. And that's 100% original stuff. And I'm using primarily the Lemur to trigger a lot of the samples, as well as do a lot of the effects. And then I also have a drum pad controller called the Alesis control pad that I play the drumsticks to play with the drums. And that's honestly, if I have a choice, that's my preferred way to perform. Because it's all original. I spent a lot of time and a lot of energy over the last several years really kind of perfecting it. And I actually get to play my own music and actually do a lot of stuff live. And then I also have an improvisational, like experimental noise music set, which is just basically a blank template where I just kind of create kind of like soundscapes on the fly. I unfortunately don't get to play with that one very much because it requires a very specific audience and time and place for that. But yeah, those are the main 3 ways that I perform.
That is a funny comment. The experimental crowd is, you got to be in the right place at the right time because people coming to dance.
Yeah, so depending on where I get booked, what time I get booked, I'll use one of those 3 sets, but primarily the DJ one and then the original one.
Nice. So that's fun because you get to mix it up a little bit, and that obviously shows that you have an awareness of where you are when you're playing and what the point of you being there is. Yeah,
I actually more than once I got booked for a gig expecting to do my all original set, and I show up for the gig and I changed my mind and ended up doing the DJ set just because that's more kind of the vibe we're going for. Because my original music, you can dance to a lot of it, but it's not like the main focus of it. It's kind of in between experimental music and dance music.
Yeah, I've had myself in some gigs where I was not well booked, maybe.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
There's a couple events that stand out in my mind a little bit. Going like doing an acoustic guitar to play, and like everyone's ready to party. It's like, oh crap, this isn't gonna work out. Or one of the most interesting ones that I had was and I don't even know what we were thinking here, but I was in a sort of like punk rock, surf rock kind of band. High energy, like a lot of fun at the bar, but we got booked to play an old folks home.
Oh, interesting.
And they were lined up in wheelchairs at this place. And we were just kind of like, whoa, not really, like kind of what happened here? How did we get here?
Yeah. How'd it
Luckily,
go?
it worked out okay. Like we turned off the distortion,
Yeah.
Turned down some of our antics as
Yeah.
well. But a lot of our music had a bit of like a 12-bar blues vibe. It was a little bit like we used to say, like it was kind of like the Beach Boys and the Ramones and Nirvana all smushed together.
Nice.
And we definitely went more Beach Boys.
Yeah. It's like in the movie Blues Brothers, they get booked to play a country music place.
Right.
And so they end up playing like Riders on the Storm.
Yeah, it's funny that that's gonna happen, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty interesting challenge to adapt to that.
Yeah, and then the nice thing about both of my main setups is they both use my iPad, so I bring the same gear no matter what.
That's
so I can
nice.
just switch. I could set up and then change my mind if I really needed to.
Yeah, you can really think on your feet and be like, eh.
Yeah, yeah. I've toyed with the idea of doing like a half and half set, where I'll do like half DJ and then half all original stuff. But that ends up making it a lot more complicated. I've done it and it worked, but it's not my preferred way to do it.
So what is the fourth one that you have that's like being born right now?
I guess it should be 5 because one of them that's being born is basically a new version of my all original stuff. So I've been playing that for the last about 3 years or so, which is a long time for me for my performance setups. I tend to rotate through them every 1 or 2 years. So I'm trying to rebuild it better. The problem is I really like it as it is. So I'm trying to figure out how to evolve it and make it more improvisational. I might make it more push-centric as opposed to iPad-centric. So I'm working on that, but that's an ongoing process. And I've got a new album that I've basically finished. And so I'm trying to figure out how to chop up my new album and rework it to be performed live. But that's been an ongoing process for a while. And then the other setup I'm working on is for collaboration with dancers. So my girlfriend is in grad school for dance. And so we've been, basically I've been making music and she's been dancing with, performing with me for a long time. And so I'm trying to build a setup where I can do improvisational scores for her to either teach a dance class or do a dance workshop and have it all be live.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's also a work in progress.
So that's an interesting one because I guess the focus of that would be more the class and you finding your way to fit into that.
Well, it's a bit more of a two-way street than people realize, I think. I've talked to a number of people who do this for a living, who make music and make music specifically for dance and dance classes. And it becomes a lot more of a conversation between you and the dance teacher about, all right, this is the kind of vibe we're looking for. And they'll snap out a tempo and you have to be able to play stuff in that tempo and then loop it and then build upon it as the dancers are kind of doing the thing that they're practicing. Which is it's a cool way because it's a bit different than normally when you're performing, especially dance music, you're performing, the dancers are reacting to you as the performer, right? But in this case, it's like you have to react to them and they have to react to you. So it's a bit more of like a cyclical relationship than just you actually just making music. And I've talked to a number of people about this who, for example, like Michael Wall, who was at Loop this year and did a workshop on this, who are just amazing at it. They're so good and have been doing it for so long. And can just come up with this amazing scores for dancers on the spot. And every time it's different and it's all improvisational. And so I've been really trying to get more into that realm with performing and just being able to do it on the fly and make something cool.
Right. Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a nice conversation going on.
Exactly. The hard part is building a template that's flexible enough that I can play whatever I want at any time and also have my computer still be able to handle it.
Yeah, right.
So I've been playing around with different weird techniques to change between racks and change between channels and mostly play stuff with my push.
Nice. That sounds like a lot of fun. When does the new album come out? That's a Zenotope?
Yep. Yeah, so Zenotope is my creative project that I've been doing for quite a while now. I'm actually not sure. It's been done for a while. I've been kind of sitting on it. I was originally going to release it as an 8-song album, and now I'm kind of toying around with the idea of releasing it in sets of 2 or 3 songs and kind of extend it out. So I was actually planning on announcing that last week, but I've been really lazy about getting the cover art done. So as soon as I get the cover art, hopefully next week, get that taken care of, I'll probably announce it and then hopefully releasing it in January/February. That's kind of what I'm looking at.
So your musical background spans quite a few genres. What kind of stuff is this?
It definitely spans quite a few genres. There's some ambient tracks on there. Most of it is kind of similar to some of my older stuff where it's like it's rhythmic, but it's not necessarily danceable, and some are more on the dancey side. It's a little bit of everything. There's some 4 on the floor on there, which is something I've never done in the past. But yeah, a little bit of everything. Weird experimental.
Yeah.
Weird experimental dance music.
Nice.
Yeah.
Careful, that might become a genre that's totally different.
Yeah.
Any guitar on there?
I didn't play any guitar myself, but I had my friend Max, who I mentioned earlier, played some guitar on it.
Nice.
And then I got some violin, I got some horns. So I tried to collaborate with different people to bring in, friends of mine to play some instruments on it.
And how did you find the combination of like real world instruments with the electronic? Sometimes I find it's not as smooth and simple as you might think.
Really, I've had kind of the opposite experience. For me, it makes everything better. Because I think, especially for things like strings and violins, using the contact violins or your kind of sampled violins, they can work okay. But if you actually have somebody who actually plays violin, 100% of the time, I will go with the person playing violin over myself playing it in MIDI. And yeah, I'm also pretty picky about who I collaborate with. So I think I've particularly picked people who kind of understand the style, who I trust, their creative input, and especially with the tracks on this album, I've had really good luck with getting all that stuff to mesh together and have it all fit with the kind of music I'm doing.
Nice.
But yeah, I've been telling a lot of people, if you have the chance to record something over, just making it in the box, get out a mic and try recording it.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, what I'll do is I'll take the sampled version, like the MIDI version, and layer it with the recorded version and get both of them put together. And that can usually sound pretty good as well.
Right. Kind of augment each other a little, bring them to life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the real violin makes the fake violin sound more real.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough. I don't know why, but it does.
Right. Well, I guess it starts to feel more like an ensemble, maybe.
Yeah. I think it kind of layers it up. And then you have the kind of like the nuance of the human performance, which makes the fake ones sound more real.
Yeah, because then it sounds like it's nuanced in its own way.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Even though it's not.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting. I find too, even with like recording, sometimes it's not so much the mic as it is like just having a different mic. Like when you're putting things together, I've been really surprised at how some of my cheaper mics really like come through on the mix when they're together with some of the better mics.
Yeah,
because it's just getting a different tone, a different part of the frequency that the other mics are just not.
Yep. Yeah, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier about having character and personality in your recordings and in your productions.
So important, right? Because
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's really what it's all about. I think if you're not creating character in your music, I mean, you might as well be doing like elevator music or something.
Yeah, or else you end up sounding like somebody else, which I think is another big issue in a lot of electronic music. Is
sounding almost like someone else.
Yeah, and I think that there already is a Skrillex and a Dead Mouse and a Bass Nectar and all these people that we don't need more of them. We need more of you and your personality. Yeah. And you can take these as influences and interpret what they're doing and put your own style on it. But I think a lot of people are really kind of in a hurry to sound the same, which I think is too bad.
I think so, because you're right. They're already out there, and the best you're gonna do is sound almost as good as they do at what they do.
Yeah, and you're playing catch up, really.
Yeah,
it's like they've got decades of experience on at least a lot of people that I'm teaching, and so if you're trying to catch up to them, you're never gonna catch up. Because by the time you get to where they are right now, they're gonna be moved on to something else. Right. So just be yourself, make the music you want to make, and that's how you can have a career in the music industry, I think.
Yeah, and it takes a confidence to do that and a sort of blind faith. But
it takes a lot of soul searching, really, to even know what your sound is. To discover your voice as an artist, to me, takes about a decade, I think, on average, for most people.
Yeah, I think it does, and as much as like I think you find it to it, it's going to evolve as well.
Yep. Yeah.
And but it's important because, again, like you said, that's what we need. We don't need more. And I could even see if you look at say someone like Skrillex, like a lot of like his stuff is like was pretty far out, like, you know, when it came out, and I could imagine a being in his head maybe and being unsure of what I was doing just because of that.
Yeah, it's terrifying to like express yourself in a really honest way in any artistic medium. And that's why I have a lot of my students share their tracks in class. So I've my 6-month program, every month there's a project that's due. And so we spend the last class of each month sharing our projects and giving each other feedback, mostly just to get practice sharing stuff with people and feeling comfortable being like, okay, this is what I did. This is my best work. It might not be perfect, and I'm putting myself out there, but like, this is it. And getting comfortable hearing feedback, giving each other feedback. Because it's not something that's, you know, should be taken lightly, like sharing and exposing, you know, your feelings and your voice.
Right.
That's always going to be intimidating, no matter how good you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whenever you put yourself out there, that's a tough one. But I think too that as much as you put yourself into things, to also remember that your entire value as an artist is not just this one track or this one album. You know, that's just a thing you did. It's not you. It's not your whole value. So again, easy to say in conversation like this, but much harder to really wholeheartedly believe. But I think that's a great exercise to just, you know, do it. Just do it. And especially in that kind of, it's a pretty safe environment, I would imagine, because you're all in the same boat. You're all going through the same feelings, and really are all there just to grow.
Yeah. Everybody's here to get better and support each other. I think that like having a community behind your music or your creative project will only make you stronger as an artist. Like nobody ever has made it in the music industry by themselves. There's always people behind them, whether it's their manager, whether it's their record label, whether it's collaborators, whether it's mixing engineers. Everybody has a team of people, even if it's their best friend who said, you know, keep going.
Right.
And I think that like having a community and building a community around your music is probably the most important thing you can do as an artist, besides develop your voice. Like those are the two things. If you develop a voice and build a community around it, then you're good to go.
Yeah.
And eventually those kinds of things, like they snowball, and that's how people can be successful, I think.
It's a big thing I stress in, especially my Berkeley online class that I teach, where we're not physically meeting, but we are sharing work, and then we have our video chats, and it's always like, hey, you know, connect with each other. It's important to have this. You know, you can help each other. You never know who's in this class and what they have to offer you.
Absolutely.
And there's only so much, you know, your significant other wants to hear about how you tweaked the filter a few hertz this way, and it made all the difference. You know?
And like I can show a track to my mom, and she'd be like, "That's nice," and I'm like, "Well, that doesn't help me get better, right? I need somebody. I need somebody to be like, oh, your snare sucks,' and like actually tell me the truth and actually like help me make it better." So it's good to have people in your corner who can be honest with you, who you feel comfortable being honest with about work, as well as people who you trust and you understand that like they have good taste. They have a good ear for understanding music. They understand your voice. They understand what you're trying to do. Those people are completely invaluable. And a lot of those people in my life, I met at Pyramid when I was a student there, learning audio production. And like those people have gone on to do really great things with their careers. And you know, having that starting from scratch together, basically, allowed us to have this bond together where, you know, no matter how successful any of us are, we can always go to each other for feedback or ideas or just to hang out and talk about music.
There's a certain camaraderie that comes out of that. Like, we were at the bottom together.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, we both had no idea what we're doing at the same time together.
Right. We struggled our way out.
And most of us have no idea what we're doing, but we're better at it than before.
Yeah. Hey, I always say that even to my high school students, like, you know, all these adults you see around here, like, You think we got it figured out? We're telling you what to do with your life. It's like, we're all winging it, man.
Yeah,
no one knows. we're winging it. There's no plan. You know, we might have some ideas, but no one has any of this stuff figured out. Music, life, anything. It's all
absolutely
a big experiment anyway.
Yep.
So cool, man. So we have a new album to look out for you, or at least some new releases anyway, depending on how you decide to package it.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. Anything else we should keep our eyes and ears open for from you?
I mean, I don't know. I'm doing a bunch of teaching locally, so I'm doing a workshop in Fort Collins in January. If any of your listeners or anybody out there lives in Colorado, come check out KMG. We're located in Boulder, and we've got a 6-month Ableton program that I'm the program director for, as well as a Pro Tools program. We do a lot of events here. The user group is located here. So yeah, but feel free to come by and check out what we're doing. It's a great community to be part of, and we're always looking for people to come and join us.
Yeah, from what I can see online, it seems like Colorado is really happening. Boulder. Are you nearby like the Rocky Mountain Synth group?
Yep. With Mark Mosher?
Yeah.
Yep. They're actually having their next meeting in Boulder that I'm planning on going to.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in talks with him to get him on the show too.
Awesome. Yeah.
We've bounced off each other a few times in the past, collaborated on a few Ableton Live racks that we put out.
Yeah, Mark's awesome.
Yeah, totally cool guy. I guess in a way it was like my first podcast because we did like a Skype talk
nice.
Talking about what we were doing, even though it wasn't actually a podcast. But I look forward to talking with him again. And yeah, he's always doing interesting stuff. But it just seems like so much is coming out of that area.
Yeah, a lot of electronic music, especially in Denver. And we're only like 30 minutes away from Denver. So it's easy to go down there to go play shows. I'm actually playing a show December 27th at a venue called Black Box in Denver. And I'm actually playing with a bunch of my students. So we've been organizing events at nightclubs and booking our students to go and play to help get them some real world experience out there.
Wow.
So I'm doing a back-to-back with one of my graduates from my program.
That's super cool. So
yeah,
you guys are not just teaching them how to do it in the computer, but you're also taking them out.
Yeah, kind of push them out of the nest. Like, all right, cool. Now it's time for you to go out and do it. Yeah, so that's a cool thing that we offer. It's not technically part of something we offer as a school. It's just something that we do kind of for fun,
right?
To help kind of get our students some exposure out there and get some real world, time and get on stage and see what happens.
That's it, though. I mean, you're making it authentic.
Yeah.
So important in education. They're like, okay, now you did this. Let's take it.
Yeah.
Field trip.
Yeah, and for a lot of the students, it's their very first time on stage, and so it's cool to be like, they've been coming to that nightclub for years, and it's like cool. We allowed them to opportunity to get on stage and see what they can do.
Nice, and they got their teachers and instructors there too for some moral support.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I bet that's a really good spirited night.
Yeah, it's super fun. And it's cool because a lot of the other students come out and support them. So it's like, I've been telling other students, like, go out and support because, like, someday it's going to be you up there. And, like, you want to have people in your audience. So it's, like, a good way for people to, like, again, build the community, help support each other, and then build those relationships.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So the site is KMGLife.com. They can check that out if you want to be a part of all that cool stuff. And for you, we've got Zenotope.com, which Zenotope.com. Anywhere else you want to send people? Social media, reach out to you?
Honestly, I don't really use Facebook anymore. I've been kind of like phasing that out. I've been trying to use Instagram more, but SoundCloud and Mixcloud is where you can find both my original tracks as well as my DJ mixes are on there on Mixcloud. And then Spotify, all that stuff. Everything is Zenotope, Zenotope.
Nice.
It's a made-up word, so if you Google it, I'm the only thing that comes up. So this shouldn't be anything else there. Yeah. But yeah, the website, and then SoundCloud and Mixcloud is where most of my stuff is. And then my most recent album is on Spotify and iTunes and all that stuff as well.
Cool. And I think as anyone listening has probably picked up by now, there's a lot you can learn from Zaak. Check out some of his programs, hit him up, learn from him.
And keep an eye on our YouTube page, the KMG YouTube page. I'm going to start releasing tips and tricks videos on that pretty soon.
Oh, cool. I'll look out for that too. Nice.
Awesome.
Hey man, it was really cool talking to you. I knew it'd be a lot of fun, just after ran into each other a few times at Loop, and each time something cool came out of it. So,
awesome. I appreciate you having me. This has been super fun.
Yeah, absolutely. This is community, This is why I love doing this podcast so much.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Talking to so many interesting people and going deep like this too, really getting the sense of like what you're doing, and I love it. It's so inspiring, Now I want to go out and do something important.
Awesome. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Zaak.
I appreciate it.
So this is Zaak Kerstetter. Check him out. Zenotope.com, KMGLife.com. And I'm Brian Funk. This is the Music Production Podcast. And we hope you have a great day. Take care, everybody.
Bye.